Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine for a moment a thought experiment. Gradually losing all your senses, your vision, your hearing, taste, smell, the feeling of pain, temperature.
Even proprioception, right? The sense of your own body.
Exactly, even that. What, if anything, would actually remain? It's a ghastly thought, perhaps, deeply disorienting, but it immediately zeroes in on a fundamental philosophical question.
Really old one.
Really old one, yeah. What is sensation?
Mhm.
And, how does this raw capacity for feeling relate to the broader concept of consciousness itself?
That thought experiment, unsettling as it is, it perfectly highlights the core of our deep dive today. It's drawn directly from Austen Clark's profoundly insightful work, A Theory of Sentience.
Right.
And we're not just casting a wide net over consciousness broadly, which is, a vast and often kind of amorphous topic in philosophy.
It can be, yeah.
Instead, we're specifically focusing on sentience, that foundational, maybe even primordial capacity for sensation, for raw feeling, for experiencing qualia, like the redness of an apple or the sharpness of pain.
Okay.
What's truly fascinating here, I think, is how Clark's book doesn't offer a new empirical theory. It's not trying to be a neuroscientific competitor or anything like that.
It's not a new brain scan study.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
Rather, it provides this meticulously crafted philosophical roadmap. It aims to organize how the incredibly diverse array of scientific accounts of sensation, from neuroscience, psychology, you name it, might coherently fit together.
Into a unified understanding.
Precisely. The central enduring puzzle that he grapples with, and really the central puzzle for us today, is this. How can a merely material nervous system, a biological machine made of cells and chemicals,
Just physical stuff.
how can that produce the alluring and utterly subjective phenomenology of sense? How do electrical impulses become the vivid color we see or the wretched pain we feel?
That's our mission in this deep dive, then. To explore this incredibly complex landscape, navigating not just the conceptual problems, but also integrating the empirical insights from Clark's rigorous analysis.
Right.
We'll delve into the fundamental nature of sensory qualities, what they are, how they're structured, and maybe why our intuitions about them are often, well, surprisingly wrong.
They often are.
Then we'll tackle the perplexing problem of spatial localization. How does our brain know where a sensation is coming from? It seems so obvious, but...
It's incredibly tricky when you look closely.
And finally, we'll examine how our sophisticated brains manage to place these features, these qualities in the world around us, allowing us to form a coherent picture of reality. So prepare for a journey into the very architecture of perception.
Where intuitions get challenged.
Definitely. Where some of our most deeply held intuitions about how we experience the world are often challenged, maybe even overturned, by scientific truth and philosophical clarity. So let's begin by setting the stage and clarifying what Clark actually means by sentience. He introduces this crucial distinction between consciousness and sentience. Now, for many of us, I think these terms might seem almost interchangeable. But Clark argues that sentience is presented as an important foundational part of consciousness. What does he mean by separating these out? Why is this distinction so vital here?
That's a critical starting point.
Yeah.
When Clark talks about creature consciousness, he's speaking about something remarkably fundamental. It's simply being awake, being aware in a very basic sense, and having some sensation.
Just experiencing something.
Exactly. If an organism can react to its environment through its senses, if it can see or hear or feel its surroundings, even in the most rudimentary way, it possesses creature consciousness. It's kind of a minimum threshold for being an experiencing subject.
Okay.
What's truly remarkable, and what Clark really emphasizes, is the ancient evolutionary ancestry of this capacity. This isn't, uniquely human or even a mammalian thing.
That goes way back.
Way, way back. Sentience, in this basic sense, precedes the birth of our own species by hundreds of millions of years, long before even the entire class of mammalia evolved. Consider the deep kinship, for example, between our own trichromatic color vision and that of, say, fish or frogs. Our eyes, structurally, functionally, they share a common blueprint with those of a frog.
Really? That far back?
Yeah, suggesting a basic architectural plan for bodily sensation that was laid down in vertebrates hundreds of millions of years ago, right alongside the development of spines and central nervous systems.
So it's not a coincidence.
Not at all. It underscores just how deeply embedded and evolutionarily conserved sentience, as the capacity for raw sensation, is in the biological world. It's a truly foundational building block of life as we know it.
And it's vital to reiterate, I think, for our listeners that Clark's theory here is primarily a philosophical one.
Yes, absolutely.
He clearly states it's a roadmap, as you said, to conceptual problems, not a new empirical account competing with neuroscience or psychology.
Right.
His main aim seems to be grappling with this persistent, profound mystery. How can a merely material nervous system neurons firing, chemicals diffusing, produce what he calls the alluring phenomenology of sense?
Mm-hmm. That what it's like.
That vivid, undeniable, subjective, what it's like quality of experiencing, as he puts it, vivid color or wretched pain.
Mm.
It's the core mind-body problem, almost.
In a sense, yes. It's how something physical can give rise to something that feels so non-physical, yet undeniably real. He's not telling us how the brain does it mechanistically.
He's not pointing to the sentience neuron.
Exactly. He's asking how we can even conceive of it doing so. How can we build a coherent conceptual framework? The ambition here is to achieve what the philosopher Wilfrid Sellars urged, a synoptic view.
A synoptic view, what does that entail?
Think of it like trying to assemble a massive, incredibly complex jigsaw puzzle. But the pieces come from literally hundreds of different boxes. Neuroscience, psychology, physics, linguistics, philosophy itself.
All these different disciplines.
Right. A synoptic view isn't about adding a new puzzle piece. It's about providing the blueprint, maybe the picture on the lid of the box, that shows how all those disparate, empirically discovered pieces are supposed to fit together.
Ah, okay. To form a coherent picture of sensation.
Exactly. Clark's aim is to offer an account that is internally consistent, logically sound, and also fully consistent with what we already know about how sensory systems operate.
So it respects the science.
Absolutely. It's about making sense of how these diverse empirical accounts might ultimately hang together conceptually to explain how a material nervous system yields the phenomenology of sense, rather than proposing a new empirical finding itself. It's a way of drawing connections across disciplines.
Which is crucial for a problem this big.
Definitely. No single field can solve it alone.
It's always fascinating to get a little glimpse behind the scenes of these big academic projects. Clark actually mentions being prompted to start this book by a simple question from David Rosenthal over lunch.
Oh, yeah.
Apparently, Rosenthal just asked, why not write another book?
Yeah.
Just like that. And this encouragement, plus support from the University of Connecticut, it highlights the collaborative environment where these deep philosophical inquiries can flourish.
That's a great little detail. It underscores that even in philosophy, which can seem solitary, the impetus often comes from that kind of collegial engagement, right? It's a wonderful illustration. This anecdote isn't just biographical. It grounds the work in a real intellectual context. It emphasizes that even the most abstract problems are often tackled collaboratively.
Right.
The project itself is fundamentally about grappling with what Clark calls the conceptual tangles around raw feeling.
Conceptual tangles, like paradoxes.
Exactly. These deep, persistent paradoxes that arise when we try to connect our subjective experience of feeling to the objective physical processes of the brain. It's a rigorous effort to build a conceptual framework, a structured way of thinking.
A way through the tangle.
A way through it, yeah. One that's not only consistent with the vast body of empirical knowledge we have, but is primarily designed to help us understand the conceptual landscape itself. To make sense of how scientific accounts could, in principle, explain our subjective, what it's like experiences. Yeah. It's about creating a clear intellectual space for these seemingly disparate realms to meet.
Okay, let's unpack this further then. Clark argues that understanding sentience goes beyond just, resolving these conceptual tangles of sensory qualities. But first, we need to understand what those qualities even are.
Right.
If we're talking about the what it's like of sensation, we really need to define the what.
Absolutely. And to do that, we can turn to Wilfrid Sellars again and his absolutely crucial distinction. He noted this profound difference between attributing a property to something experienced.
Like saying the apple is red.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Versus attributing a property to the experiencing of it itself. Paradigmatically, predicates like red, square, or loud are, in their primary use, ascribed directly to physical objects or events in the world. When you have a sensation of red, it's first and foremost a sensation of an object that is red. Red characterizes the thing seen, the apple, not the act of seeing itself.
That seems intuitive, but why is that distinction so important here?
Because it sets up a key conceptual framework.
Yeah.
It means our sensory states are fundamentally about something external. They represent the world. They're not just internal, private states floating free.
Okay, so they have intentionality, they point outwards.
Precisely.
So when we talk about quality space, as Clark does, we're not talking about ordering the stimuli themselves, like arranging wavelengths on a spectrum.
No, exactly. It's not about the physics of the stimuli primarily. Instead, we're talking about an ordering of the qualities that those stimuli present to us, the subjective experience.
Right.
For instance, in terms of hue, orange is undeniably positioned between red and yellow in our experience. But this isn't about specific wavelength metrics.
Why not?
Because physically disparate stimuli, what scientists call metamers, can present the exact same hue quality.
Metamers.
Yeah.
Like different recipes of light looking the same.
Exactly. You could have two very different combinations of wavelengths hitting your eye, maybe one with lots of red and green light, another with just the right mix of yellow and blue. And both could appear as the exact same shade of orange to you.
Wow. Okay, so that really challenges the idea of a simple one-to-one mapping between a physical property and a perceived quality.
It absolutely does. It's a profoundly critical point, and one that trips up many intuitive understandings of perception. Discriminability, our ability to tell things apart, always has as its terms classes of stimuli, not the qualities themselves in isolation. The relationships among qualities like orange being between red and yellow, or one blue being bluer than another, these are what Clark calls structural facts.
Structural facts.
They're facts about the properties of discriminability, matching, difference, and so on that hold among those classes of stimuli, how we group stimuli based on whether we can tell them apart.
So our knowledge of the qualities themselves is indirect.
In a way, yes. As the philosopher Fred Dretske put it, our knowledge of the qualitative properties of sensation is knowledge by description, or even displaced perception. We can't directly look at our own sensations.
We can't introspect the redness itself.
Not in that direct way. Instead, we make inferences about what sensations must be like to explain how things look or feel to us. For instance, by carefully observing variations among standardized color patches like a Pantone system.
Right.
We can infer something about the qualitative character of our own visual states.
Yeah.
The color sample system acts as an indirect, descriptive way of perceiving the internal character of our own experiences, precisely because those internal states aren't directly observable.
It's like using an external map to understand our internal territory.
That's a great analogy, yes.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, and I think really challenges our everyday understanding of vision. Let's use color vision as a specific example.
Perfect example.
Our common intuition, maybe from art class or printing, suggests a simple primary color model, right? Mix red, yellow, blue paint or red, green, blue light.
The additive and subtractive primaries.
Yeah, and you get everything else. It feels straightforward. But nature, as it often does, has a surprising, counterintuitive twist.
It certainly does. For a long time, the dominant model was the Young-Helmholtz trichromatic theory. It proposed 3 types of cone cells in the retina, each most sensitive to different wavelengths. Basically, 3 independent primary color detectors.
Like in a digital camera sensor.
Very much like that. It's what you might intuitively expect. But then in the late 19th century, Ewald Hering proposed his utterly counterintuitive opponent process theory.
Opponent process?
Yeah. Hering posited that our visual system processes color in opposing pairs. Red cancels green and yellow cancels blue. The idea was you couldn't perceive reddish green or yellowish blue in the same spot.
That sounds weird. Red cancels green.
Exactly. It seemed implausible to many at the time. How could red, a primary, be related to green in this oppositional way? Yet despite that initial implausibility, empirical evidence, especially from neuroscience decades later, now strongly supports Hering's theory. It's the truth about how we perceive colors.
So our experience of color is fundamentally relational.
At its root, yes. These hue qualities are relational, not absolute monadic properties.
Okay, so what about black? Is that just the absence of light in this model?
Not quite. According to Hering, black isn't just zero light. It's also a relational property requiring active inhibition. He argued that you cannot truly see black unless you can also see white simultaneously, or at least nearby.
Active inhibition. So the brain is doing something to create black.
Yes. It's not merely darkness. It's a specific quality produced when the black-white opponent channel is inhibited, pushed below its baseline activity level. It's a dynamic, actively constructed perception.
Is there experimental evidence for that?
Oh, absolutely. Hans Wallach's 1948 experiment on lightness constancy demonstrated it compellingly. He showed that a central disk with a fixed luminance could appear as any shade of gray from white to pitch black just by changing the brightness of its surround.
Just by changing the background.
Exactly. The brighter the surround, the darker the center appeared. If the surround became very bright white, the center could appear truly black. even though the light hitting the disk itself hadn't changed at all.
So it's seeing the ratio.
Precisely. The apparent shade registers a ratio of luminance between the center and surround. Think about your TV screen. When it's off, it's usually a dull gray, right?
Yeah.
But turn it on, and you see black halves or black space, not by subtracting light from those areas, but by adding light to other parts of the screen. That perception of black is produced by inhibition in the opponent system.
That's amazing. Black produced by adding light.
It is, and this same relational nature applies to hues. Orange, for instance, isn't just a mix. It has both red and yellow components in relation to each other.
Like northeast has north and east components.
Exactly like that. Hearing's theory implies you can't truly see orange unless you can also see red and yellow as its constituent balanced components. It's a dynamic equilibrium.
It's truly disorienting to realize our subjective experience is structured like that. It forces us to revise these really basic pre-theoretic notions.
It does. It feels impossible, counterintuitive, but the best science and philosophy suggests this is how perception actually works.
So how does this system actually get the information in the first place? Through transduction, right?
Right. At the very start of any sensory system, eye, ear, skin, you have specialized cells called transducers. They convert stimulus energy, like light or sound waves, into electrical signals in neurons.
Okay.
Take the cones in your retina. The short wavelength cones, for instance, are most responsive around 430 nanometers. But they're broadly tuned, meaning they respond to a range of wavelengths. And crucially, they conflate wavelength and intensity. A less intense light at 430 nanometer might produce the same response in that single cone as a more intense light at, say, 480 nanometer.
Yeah. So one cone by itself can't tell the difference. It can't know the true wavelength.
Correct. A single cone is like a simple light meter. It can't distinguish pure color from brightness.
So how do we get color vision then?
The magic happens through comparisons of the outputs for multiple types of broadly tuned cells. This is what the neuroscientist Russell DeValois emphasized. He said, it is the comparison of the excitatory and inhibitory inputs at each synaptic level which forms the very basis of the information processing.
It's the relationships between the signals.
Exactly. It's all about the relative activity across different channels, like the red-green channel and the blue-yellow channel.
Okay.
That's the fundamental principle. Sensory systems, whether it's vision, touch, hearing, operate predominantly in relational terms alone. They are quite astonishingly, appallingly insensitive to absolute intensities.
Appallingly insensitive.
That was Clark's phrase, and it's apt. They're exquisitely tuned to differences, ratios, changes, relations. What appears to us as a stable intrinsic property, like a specific shade of gray or a particular hue, it's actually the nervous system registering a relation between different levels of input. This strongly reinforces the idea that hues are at root relational, not absolute properties existing independently, like positive and negative charge, or north and south. Inherently relational.
Okay, so if sensations themselves, like color, are fundamentally relational, what does this mean for how we locate things? How does our nervous system know where these sensations are? How do we pinpoint a sound or feel an itch in a specific spot?
Right, that's the next huge puzzle.
Clark presents this captivating and, frankly, quite disorienting puzzle he calls the unlabeled meter reading problem. Imagine, he says, being a homunculus, a little person inside your own brain. You're looking at millions of these unlabeled meter readings from all your sensory nerves.
Just raw data streams.
Yeah, the meters are fluctuating, maybe indicating intense activity, say, a crushing pain somewhere. But there are no labels saying where these receptors are located. How would you possibly know where to send the signal to scratch? Or even which foot feels cold?
You're just seeing voltage readings, basically. No map.
No map. How is localization even possible?
This is a profoundly difficult neurosensory engineering problem. And it's not just philosophical navel-gazing. From a purely mechanistic view, a neuron deep in the cortex only knows its own inputs.
It doesn't have a GPS coordinate attached.
Exactly. It lacks any inherent label for distal locations. It doesn't intrinsically know where its inputs originated out in the world or on the body's surface. The sheer feat of pinpointing a sensation, cold feet, an elbow ache, seems, on the face of it, impossible given this constraint.
Yet we do it constantly.
Effortlessly, every waking moment. Which suggests either our initial question is somehow ill-posed or the brain solution is incredibly subtle and deeply integrated into perception itself. It highlights this huge gap between raw neural activity and our subjective localized experience.
So this seemingly impossible puzzle, it must have generated some interesting historical
Oh,
theories.
absolutely. Some fascinating and sometimes rather convoluted doctrines in both psychology and philosophy.
Like what?
Well, in psychology, you had the rise of theories of local sign, starting with the philosopher Lotz in the 19th century.
Local signs.
Yeah, the idea was that peripheral regions, points on your skin, or retina, somehow carry intrinsic indicators of their origin, like a tiny broadcast signal, live from your left big toe.
A little tag.
Kind of. These local signs were thought to be characteristic peculiarities, maybe faint qualitative differences, unique to the precise point where the sensation originates. The debate then was, are these signs conscious? Do they vary in intensity? Are they intrinsically spatial?
But does that really solve the problem?
Well, the critique, as Clark and others point out, is that it kind of just pushes the problem back. If there's a local sign or a label, the homunculus still needs to interpret that label.
Right. Knowing the label is squiggle squiggle doesn't help if you don't know where squiggle squiggle is.
Precisely. It doesn't solve the fundamental mapping problem. And the term local sign itself can be confusing, suggesting spatial relations are properties of the sensation rather than a distinct function of spatial discrimination. It doesn't quite capture the feeling of simply hearing one sound in one place.
So what did philosophers propose? Projection.
That was another major approach, yes. Projection theories. These posit that qualities of our mental states, our sensations, are somehow projected outwards onto regions of physical space.
Making them seem like properties of external objects.
The afterimage is the classic example everyone can experience. You see a flash, and the lingering blob seems to be out there in your visual field, moving when you move your eyes.
And Emmert's law relates to this.
Yes, Emmert's law shows the apparent size of the afterimage depends on the apparent distance of the surface you project it onto. Projected on a near wall, it looks small. Projected on a distant mountain, it looks huge, even though the retinal angle is constant. It's a compelling case of optical projection.
So is the idea that the blueness we see is literally a property of our mind projected onto the sky?
Well, there are different versions. A literal projectivist might say something like that. More common is figurative projection. The idea isn't that the mental property is the sky's property, but that the spatial character of experience arises from projecting mental qualities onto phenomenal properties characterizing regions of space.
Okay.
And more sophisticated versions, by philosophers like O'Shaughnessy or Baldwin, link projection directly to intentionality. Sensation isn't just an internal state, it's fundamentally about a region of space.
So the place it projects to is the place it's about.
Exactly. In this view, projection is a species of intentionality. It's our mind being directed towards a particular spatial location.
This raises a really important question then. If we project or attribute sensations to places, is location just another sensory quality like red or loud or rough?
That's a key point. Clark argues strongly against this. He introduces what he calls the partition argument.
The partition argument. Why can't location just be another quality?
It seems intuitive that it could be, right? But the partition argument is quite elegant. It states that phenomenal occurrences, how things seem to us, have to be divided into two distinct kinds.
Two kinds.
Those properties that count for qualitative identity and those that do not. Think about hearing two bird cheeps at the same time.
Okay.
They might sound exactly the same in pitch, timbre, loudness, qualitatively identical sounds, but you still distinguish them as two distinct events. Why?
Because they're coming from different places, one overhead, one to the left.
Precisely. They differ in location. And crucially, that difference in apparent location does not stop them from being qualitatively identical sounds.
Ah, I see. If location were just another quality, then two sounds from different places couldn't be qualitatively identical.
Exactly. They would have to be qualitatively different, which just isn't how we experience it. This implies that whatever properties of sensation account for differences in apparent location, those properties are somehow separate from those that determine qualitative identity, like pitch or timbre. We treat place differently.
We see this partition with the moon illusion too, don't we?
Vividly. The moon looks much larger at the horizon than high overhead, even though it makes the exact same size image on your retina.
Why does that happen again?
More depth cues at the horizon, trees, buildings, hills. These cues make the moon appear further away. And because our visual system compensates for perceived distance.
It makes the moon look bigger to account for the perceived distance.
Right. It's not just about the raw visual angle. The system is parsing the incoming energy into distinct components. brightness, color, and perceived distance or location. We don't just see a large yellow blob, we see a large yellow object far away.
Like hearing a loud siren in the distance, not a quiet one nearby.
Exactly the same principle. The auditory system partitions the variance in the sound energy into loudness and distance. So the total variation in phenomenal appearance within a sense modality gets partitioned. Variation in location and variation in the qualities at those locations.
And this partitioning is something that other theories, like the adverbial theory, struggle with.
They do struggle. The adverbial theory tries to collapse everything into adverbs, like sensing readily left cornerly. But it famously fails the many properties problem.
Remind me what that is.
How do you distinguish sensing one red square from sensing something red and sensing something square that are not the same thing, maybe in different locations? If all you have is red square sensing, you can't easily represent the binding of those properties to a single object or location.
It lacks the structure to link properties together at a place.
Precisely. It can't distinguish a red square from just redness and squareness happening at the same time.
So this leads directly to Clark's solution, the feature placing schema.
Yes. He presents it quite simply as appearance of quality Q at region R.
Quality Q at region R.
This acknowledges and formally represents those two distinct components, the quality Q and the spatial region R, that can't be fused or reduced to one another.
So the of Q part is the what?
Colors, odors, tastes, pitches, textures, the sensory qualities themselves, yes.
And the at R part is the where.
Exactly. But it's more than just where. It's about the underlying mechanisms of spatiotemporal discrimination, the neural machinery that determines where and when.
And these mechanisms differ across senses.
Tremendously. Vision uses retinal coordinates, head-centered coordinates, world-centered coordinates. Touch uses body maps. Audition uses time differences and intensity differences between the ears. Even within a sense like vision, you have different coordinate systems, egocentric versus allocentric.
So R is a placeholder for these complex spatial systems.
Yes. The use of simple English words like cheap, here, there in the schema is just schematic. It represents fundamental capacities far less sophisticated than our natural language, but remarkably effective nonetheless.
And crucially, this feature placing scheme is pre-linguistic.
Absolutely vital point. It operates below the level of language and concepts. Clark argues it's common across vertebrates, much, much older than human language.
So a lioness tracking a gazelle uses this.
Presumably, yes. It provides an incredibly efficient way for mute sensory systems to track targets without needing words. It enables them and us to distinguish simultaneous instances of the same quality, like those two identical bird cheeps.
Without the at R, they'd just merge into one sound.
Exactly. A pure flux of qualities model, lacking spatial discrimination, couldn't separate them. The placing is essential for individuating simultaneous events.
So the placing component, the at R, provides the crucial string to bundle the sticks of qualities, as Clark puts it.
That's his metaphor, yes. It solves the many properties problem by focusing attribution to a specific identified place. The place of the color is also the place of the cat.
It binds features together.
It's the binding mechanism that gives structure to our perceived world, allowing us to see a coherent red square, not just redness and squareness floating around.
So if we follow this argument, our sensory processes aren't just passively registering qualities like red or loud. They're actively identifying locations. They're referential in some basic way.
That's the idea. Feature placing acts as a proto-referential capacity. It requires an apparatus of identification within sensation itself, analogous to how singular terms, like names or descriptions, function in language to pick out specific things.
So what are these things that sensation identifies? What does the R variable range over?
According to Clark, they range over space-time regions of finite but definite extent.
Space-time regions, not just places, but places and times.
Yes, that's crucial. These regions can be external, in front of our sense organs, like a sound coming from that corner of the room now. Or they can be internal, within the body, like a sharp pain precisely in your knee a moment ago.
Even hearing your own voice seems located inside your head.
Right, by bone conduction. The auditory system can identify intracranial regions, too.
And emphasizing place times accounts for delays, right? Like seeing lightning before hearing thunder.
Precisely. It accounts for signal propagation delays and temporal discrepancies. A distant star is seen as it was years ago. A high-flying jet is seen here but heard there a moment later.
Because sound travels slower.
Much slower. Even within the body, slow pain from C fibers arrives later than fast pain from A delta fibers. Yet both signal bad news about the same place-time of injury. Our sensory system is constantly calculating these dynamic place-times.
Okay, so why regions rather than infinitely small space-time points? Can't our senses be incredibly precise?
They can be astonishingly precise. Think about detecting tiny vibrations on the skin, nanometers even, or the eardrum moving by fractions of a nanometer.
Or hearing tiny time differences between the ears to locate sound?
Right down to microseconds. Bats do even better, nanoseconds for echolocation. So these regions can be breathtakingly minute, almost bordering on mathematical points.
So is it points or regions?
Clark leaves that as largely an empirical question. The framework allows for incredibly fine-grained discrimination. Whether it resolves down to true points or just infinitesimally small regions is something science might eventually tell us. The key is the capacity for fine discrimination exists.
Clark also takes a moment to clarify the term visual field, which can be ambiguous. He identifies three senses.
Yes, it's an important clarification. First, there's the field of view, the actual physical space-time regions you're seeing, the house and tree outside your window right now.
The real world stuff.
Right. Second, the array of impressions, the sum of visual sense data, your internal mental map, which has spatial relations analogous to physical space but depends on your psychology. What a honeybee sees would be a different array.
Okay.
And third, the virtual world objects as represented, intentional objects. Think of mirror images, illusions, or Macbeth's dagger, things that appear but might not be physically there in the same way.
So which visual field does feature placing need?
Clark argues quite forcefully that it only needs the first one, the field of view, the physical space-time regions, as the reference for sensory identification.
Why not the others?
He argues versions 2 and 3 are unnecessary philosophical baggage, ontological commitments we don't need that can lead us astray. Talking about a separate visual space, version 2, risks positing a whole second set of locations distinct from physical ones.
Well, maybe it's just different ways of mapping the same physical space.
Exactly. Different coordinate schemes don't necessarily yield new domains of locales.
Mm.
And talking about the virtual world, version 3, can make us forget the limits of intentional contexts, that seeming to see something doesn't mean it exists.
Like seeing a mirage doesn't mean there's water there.
Precisely.
Mm.
He urges caution. Avoid positing extra entities in these other fields and focus on our direct sensory engagement with the physical world via the field of view.
Okay, but like any system, our senses mess up. They make mistakes. How does feature placing account for illusions, misperceptions, hallucinations, non-veridical perception?
This is where the model really shows its strength, I think, because the power of representation lies fundamentally in the power to misrepresent.
If it can't be wrong, it's not really representing.
Exactly. Feature placing offers at least 3 neat categories for non-veridical appearance, mostly while keeping the identified reference within the real world.
What's the first category?
Misattribution of quality. Here, the sensory reference succeeds the system, correctly identifies a place-time, but the predication, the quality cue attributed, is wrong.
Like seeing something as red when it isn't, maybe due to weird lighting.
Perfect example, or Clark's example. Paul sees a pink ice cube in his freezer. He correctly identifies the freezer region, the R, but misattributes pink, the Q, to it. The location is real, the color is mistaken.
Okay, makes sense. What's the second?
Misreference. Here, the system identifies the wrong place. The R is incorrect. The classic example is a barn owl's auditory system, sometimes reversing front and back.
So it hears a sound behind it, as if it's in front.
Yes. The neural delay lines select the wrong spatial identifier, hither instead of thither, or vice versa. The neurons are working fine, but the location assigned is wrong. Clark calls this normal misperception, naming the wrong place.
Like when you think your phone is ringing in the other room, but it's right next to you.
Exactly like that.
And the third category?
Missing referent. This applies to some hallucinations, where the sensation lacks a real-world referent for the object perceived, though it might still identify a place. Macbeth's dagger again.
Is this a dagger I see before me?
Right. His hallucination might successfully identify an empty region of air in front of him, as R, but falsely characterize it as a dagger, a Q. This fails to refer to an actual dagger, but it does refer to a place-time, just mischaracterizing what's there.
So even in hallucinations, there's often a real spatial anchor.
Often, yes. The sensory identification still frequently picks out a place-time in the real world, making the experience vivid and compelling, even if it mischaracterizes its contents or identifies the wrong place. It refines our idea of what perceptual falsity means.
That's a powerful framework. And it also helps explain cross-modal perception, how sight and sound seem to refer to the same event.
It does. Different sensory modalities, despite their very distinct ways of identifying placetimes, can ultimately converge and refer to the same space-time regions.
Like typing, seeing, feeling, hearing the key press all happen at the same spot.
Exactly. That's a fundamental cross-modal identity. The physical layout of our sensory receptors, how they overlap and are distributed across the body, provides this kind of invisible translation key,
Yeah.
allowing sensory coordination.
So the body itself is the key, allowing us to build a concept of space independent of any single sense.
That's a crucial part of it. This is how we eventually escape the confines of individual sensory fields and build a unified, multimodal picture of the world.
And this helps solve that original unlabeled meter reading problem.
It's absolutely crucial for it. Remember the homunculus seeing the unlabeled itch signal?
Yeah, no idea where it's coming from just based on that 1 meter.
But if simultaneously the homunculus gets visual input, seeing the left foot where the itch is, and those visual inputs are cross-referenced with these somatosensory inputs.
Ah, then it knows where the itch is, even if the itch signal itself wasn't labeled left foot.
Precisely. This cross-fix between modalities allows the system to identify the same place through different channels. Sight confirms touch, sound confirms sight. This explains how the nervous system can determine the distal causes of neuron firings and pinpoint sensations accurately. It's remarkable multisensory integration, creating order from potentially chaotic data.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly. If our sensory states represent the world, what makes them true or false? This correctness condition question seems central.
It is.
Clark pushes us to re-examine this for color sensation, leading to what he calls the intriguing false color model. What's that about?
Well, historically, the traditional view, chromatic atomism, assumed colors are intrinsic monadic properties. Like redness is a simple independent property an object just has, like mass.
Seems reasonable.
But it runs into trouble immediately with metamers, those physically different stimuli that look the same, like our 2 different recipes for orange light.
Right.
If redness is a universal property, then things that look red, say a maple leaf and a tomato, would need to share something physically identical to be red. But they don't. Their reflectance spectra are different.
They reflect different combinations of wavelengths across the spectrum.
Exactly. They absorb and reflect light differently, yet they look the same color to us. This really challenges the idea of a simple intrinsic physical property of redness that corresponds directly to our sensation.
So if identifying an identical physical property for all red things is hard, how do we define correct color perception? What makes seeing red true?
Clark analyzes color theories on a spectrum. Always true, mostly false, always false. He argues that theories at the extremes, always true or always false, basically make correctness conditions meaningless. Think about it. If a representation can never be wrong, always true, or never be right, always false, it's not really representing in a meaningful way.
Because, as Dretske said, the power to represent is the power to misrepresent.
Exactly. For a system to truly represent, it has to have the capacity to get it wrong sometimes. Otherwise, it's just registering or mirroring.
So where's the difficulty in finding conditions that are sometimes true, sometimes false?
It gets tricky when you allow highly relational, anthropocentric, or narcissistic properties. For example, is a rectangle looking like a rhombus from an angle of false appearance?
Or is it just how rectangles look from that angle, a veridical appearance from that perspective?
Many would argue the latter. Or think about lukewarm water feeling warm to a cold hand and cold to a warm hand. If the thermal quality represents the rate of heat change, both experiences are arguably veridical relative to the hand's prior state.
But if everything becomes veridical under some condition?
You risk collapsing into an always true scenario where all conflict disappears. Every apparent color or temperature is real under some description. This means there's no real possibility of misrepresentation, which undermines the whole concept of representation itself. We need a way to distinguish genuine error from mere relativity.
So if just looking at the production of sensations isn't enough to ground truth and falsehood, where else can we look?
Ruth Millikan, a philosopher of biology, offers a really influential suggestion. Look to the consumers of the representation, not just its producers.
The consumers. What does that mean in the brain?
Millikan's biosemantics proposes a functional account. Representations function as representations for the system itself. One part of the system produces tokens like neural signals for another part to consume. Think of downstream neural circuits or behavioral systems. The consumer part has to understand the content.
How does it understand?
It relies on mapping rules that are constant and, crucially, selected by evolution. Because Providing that specific information gave the organism a selective advantage.
Ah, so the rules work because they help the organism survive and reproduce.
Precisely. As Dredske put it, beliefs are maps by means of which we steer. The content of the map, what makes it true or false, falls out from explaining how the consumers, our steering mechanisms, our behaviors, succeed or fail based on that map. These evolutionarily forged mapping rules are the source of correctness conditions.
So our brain interprets certain patterns as red because
Mm,
historically acting on that interpretation, like eating the red fruit, was adaptive.
that's the core idea, yes.
This really shifts the focus then. If the purpose of color vision isn't just identifying absolute properties, what is it for? Mullan, a leading researcher, suggests three functions.
Yes, John Mullen suggests camouflage breaking, contour completion, and identifying biological kinds like ripe fruit or potential mates.
Camouflage breaking, like spotting a monkey in the green leaves.
Exactly. And for tasks like that or spotting a ripe banana among green leaves, difference coding is far more effective than trying to identify the absolute yellowness of the banana or greenness of each leaf.
Difference coding.
The idea is the visual system doesn't necessarily register the absolute hue of each patch. Instead, it registers changes or edges in spectral properties. It signals here things get redder or here things get yellower.
It focuses on the boundaries.
Right. This allows for highly efficient camouflage breaking. Mullen points out that the first two functions, breaking camouflage and completing contours, primarily require detecting spectral differences, not identifying absolute colors. The targets for interpretation aren't fixed color values everywhere, but just the edges between them.
So the system just needs to say, spectral change here in this direction.
Pretty much. It's a profoundly action-oriented perspective on vision. What information do you need to act effectively?
This highlights what Clark calls a stunning asymmetry in perception. Can you explain that?
Yes, the asymmetry is this. Our perceptions of sameness do not reliably indicate objective similarities.
Like the leaf and the tomato looking the same red, but being physically different.
Exactly. But our perceptions of surface color differences do reliably indicate physical differences. When your visual system detects a sharp color edge, that almost always corresponds to a real physical difference in the world. Different material, different illumination, etc.
So the system is an optimist about similarities, as Clark says.
Meaning it might lump physically different things together if they look the same.
But when they find a difference, an edge, it is time to pay attention.
Precisely. Because differences usually signal something real and potentially important.
And this applies to temporal changes, too, like the sun coming out.
Yes, that's a powerful temporal edge.
Yeah.
The critical job of sensory systems, honed by evolution, is the reliable detection of differences and changes. That's paramount for navigation, finding food, avoiding danger. Change signals importance.
How does this help with identifying biological kinds, like a blackbird? Its feathers look different in sun versus shade.
Right? Trying to identify a fixed reflectance spectrum for the blackbird would fail because it varies wildly with lighting. Instead, the system likely identifies spatiochromatic shapes.
Spatiochromatic shapes.
Patterns of relations among colors and places that remain relatively invariant across different viewing conditions. Think about recognizing a face. The relationship between the eyes, nose, mouth stays constant even as the lighting changes the absolute color values.
Or blushing, it's not a specific hex code of red.
Exactly. It's a change from a baseline skin tone to something noticeably redder. It's a temporal edge, a different signal that reliably indicates a specific biological or emotional state, regardless of the person's baseline skin color or the exact lighting.
Okay, this difference-based view is powerful, but it raises a fundamental question. How do we define qualitative identity? What makes two sensations feel the same, if not by them matching some absolute property?
This is where Clark makes a really interesting, almost radical move. He argues that qualitative identity is fundamentally defined by a global incapacity to discriminate.
An incapacity to discriminate. So sameness is just failing to tell things apart.
Essentially, yes. It's a statistical notion. Two stimuli are qualitatively identical if their differences are not statistically significant over repeated trials. The sensory system simply cannot reliably tell them apart.
That feels disorienting. It means qualitative identity isn't a fixed thing you achieve.
Right. It's something one can approach only at the limit, as Clark puts it. It's not about finding strict numerical identity in the world. It's about polling populations of neurons, assessing probabilities. Is the difference between these two neural patterns significant or just noise?
So the fact that the red maple leaf looks exactly like the ripe tomato.
Isn't because they share some identical physical property of redness. It's because our discrimination mechanisms, operating on ratios and differences, cannot reliably tell them apart.
So resemblance comes first, and it does the heavy lifting. We perceive similarity not because things are identical, but because our system fails to differentiate them.
Precisely. It's a profound reversal of common sense. In sensory systems, the root relation isn't similarity, it's difference. Similarity in this framework is not but a failure to discriminate. Discrimination carries the crucial information.
And this difference-based primitive aligns perfectly with the false color model.
Yes. It suggests we could focus semantic interpretation not on the absolute hues filling every patch, but on the borders, the edges where they change. These spatiotemporal edges are the things that are typically veridical. They represent real changes like reflectance changes here.
And that's what's useful for navigation and survival.
Absolutely. Detecting the difference between a good place and a bad place, between predator and background, and being able to move accordingly, that's an ancient fundamental principle of sentience.
Okay, so let's try to bring this all together. What does this deep dive reveal as the core argument? It seems sentience, at its fundamental level, operates by partitioning our experience.
Yes, partitioning variation in phenomenal appearance into two crucial distinct components. Qualities, cue and spatial regions. It's not just a buzz of sensations, it's structured.
Right.
To reiterate, the of-cue component is about the sensory qualities themselves, the colors, odors, tastes, textures, the what that is experienced. While the ad-r component is about the mechanisms of spatiotemporal discrimination, the sophisticated neural machinery calculating where and when.
And these mechanisms have limits, right? Like the 2-point threshold on the scan.
Exactly. They allow features to be placed only as accurately as the discrimination mechanism allows. If 2 points on your back are too close, the ad-r mechanism can't distinguish 2 locations, so you perceive one touch of Q at one blurred region at R.
So there's a formal difference between Q and R. Ad-r identifies, of Q characterizes.
Yes, that's paramount. Ad-r picks out or identifies a region, while of Q describes what's found at that identified region. This is why Clark argues, if you imagine no space sensation, pure quality without location.
What's lost is the ability to count distinct simultaneous instances of the same quality.
Exactly. Our 2 identical bird cheats, without distinct ad-r components, would just fuse into one undifferentiated sound event. You lose the basis for counting.
So this capacity for sensory identification, the at-r part, it's genuinely proto-referential, a basic form of pointing.
Yes, that's the claim. The collecting principles, how placetimes collect features, but features don't collect placetimes in the same way, are formally analogous to subjects and predicates in language.
Subject, the cat refers, predicate is white describes, at-r refers, of Q describes.
A very close analogy. This makes sensory identification proto-referential, allowing animals without language to effectively target locations. Think of a bat picking out a moth's precise location using purely egocentric identifiers like echo time lags and intensity differences. That's ad-r in action.
And this primitive sensory identification discriminating spacetime regions, it comes before identifying whole objects like moth or cat.
Yes. It's independent of and logically prior to the conceptual apparatus needed to conceive of a distinct material object. It's a foundation upon which object concepts are built.
It sounds remarkably like what the philosopher P.F. Strawson described as feature-placing languages.
There's a very strong parallel. Strawson imagined languages that lack count nouns. A cat, 3 trees, or an identity predicate is the same cat as...
Oh, you can't talk about individual objects in the way we do.
Right. But they can still place features. They can say things like, it is raining, placing the feature rain generally, or there is water here, placing the feature water at a specific location.
So this level of representation is pre-ontological.
That's a good way to put it. It's not explicitly positing the existence of discrete objects, but it provides the raw, spatially organized material that is absolutely necessary for us to eventually conceptualize objects.
And this is where it gets really profound. The capacity to identify the places is what allows us to make the leap from just seeing whiteness and cattiness together.
To forming the integrated concept of a unified object, a white cat.
How does that work?
The consistent overlap of features at a place provides the primordial locus for the positing of an object. Even though raw sensory representation lacks an explicit identity predicate, it can discriminate the stable, recurrent co-localization of features.
So seeing white, furry, pointy-eared, meowing consistently happening at the same place over time.
That provides the raw material for our minds to later bundle those features and posit an underlying object, the cat that possesses them. As Clark says, in sentience, we find the mechanisms that make reification possible.
Reification, the process of treating concepts or features as concrete things.
Exactly. Sentience provides the spatial framework that makes that cognitive leap possible.
So this simpler, ancient system of sensory identification, this feature placing, it's absolutely vital, Clark says, to our acquisition of an object-based conceptual scheme.
Yes, the very way we think about the world as made up of distinct objects depends on this underlying sensory capacity to identify and track locations.
And it's also crucial for language, for direct reference.
He argues it is. To the continuing success of varieties of direct reference, any linguistic term like that cat or Mount Everest, if it's ultimately grounded in a perceptual encounter, relies fundamentally on these ancient systems of sensory discrimination that allow us to pick out and bind qualities to specific locations in the first place.
Wow. It connects basic sensation right up to complex thought and language.
Absolutely. And that brings us back to the philosophical goal. Clark's work aims to provide this synoptic view, this conceptual roadmap.
To guide our understanding and avoid pitfalls.
Right, to help us navigate the terrain, clarify the conceptual tangles, and see how different scientific findings might fit together. Of course, science moves on, so these maps need constant redrawing. But the core insight remains powerful. Our most complex forms of thought, language, reference, our coherent understanding of a world of objects. They were all built upon these deeply ancient, surprisingly simple-seeming mechanisms of spatial discrimination and feature placing. It's quite a testament to biological evolution's elegance.
We've taken a really deep dive there into the intricate world of sentience, peeling back layers of perception to reveal these surprisingly elegant and often counterintuitive ways our capacity to feel, see, and hear is structured. From the opponent processes in our eyes actively constructing color, to the brain's ingenious cross-modal solutions for pinpointing sounds, and this fundamental role of detecting differences rather than just sameness. It's a truly fascinating look at the foundational building blocks of our conscious experience.
It really challenges how we think about perception, doesn't it?
It certainly does.
And for me, this exploration really underscores a profound asymmetry. While the what of sensation, the raw quality of redness or pain, often remains elusive, subjective, maybe even paradoxical.
Right, the hard problem.
Where our capacity for precise spatial discrimination, for feature placing, serves as this invisible unifying force. It binds our entire sensory world together into a coherent, actionable reality.
It provides the structure.
It provides the structure.
Yeah.
And it forces us to consider that maybe the most complex, alluring aspects of our subjective experience are actually built upon foundations that are, at their core, surprisingly simple, ancient mechanisms of localization and differentiation.
That's a provocative thought. What are the implications?
Well, how might a deeper understanding of these proto-referential capacities, these basic ways of identifying this place and that place, reshape our future models of artificial intelligence? Could it allow machines to truly perceive and locate, not just process data? Or perhaps even more profoundly, how might it alter our understanding of non-human minds? What does it truly mean for another animal operating with these mechanisms to be sentient?
That is a lot to mull over. We genuinely encourage you, our listeners, to reflect on your own sensory experiences after this deep dive. Next time you see a vibrant color, maybe that brilliant orange sunset, or you effortlessly locate where a sound is coming from, or even just pinpoint an itch, perhaps you'll think of the ancient neural machinery at work.
Constantly placing features.
Constantly performing these incredible silent feats of identification and differentiation, building your world moment by moment. Thank you so much for joining us on this fascinating deep dive into sentience.
Thank you.
Until next time, keep exploring the incredible world around and within you.